What is up, everybody? It is Alex from Heavy New York calling from the Alto again, and this time on Zoom we got Locusts and Honey. Thank you both so much for coming on the show today. It's great to have you all here.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, it's so awesome to have you here because these two new songs that we've heard so far, "Trader to Love" and "Leathern Cord," are both fantastic tracks, and I cannot wait to hear more. I know you guys are evolving, going from the whole like sort of bedroom band thing to having a full lineup. So, with these two singles that we heard so far, is this like a good representation of what we're going to continue to hear from Locusts and Honey, or are these just one little taste and there's a lot more to be discovered and a lot more experimentation involved?
Do you want me to go first, Steve?
Yeah, you did it on them.
Well, so the EP wise, it was a kind of started off as a I did all the music, and really it was this interest in the more funeral doom side of things. So really slow. I come from a more of a black metal-y type background, so it was born of some of the riffs that I wanted to use, but felt would benefit from just a sort of slower beat, really, to put most simply. So I think going forward, we might, there might be fewer of those trappings. Steve's more of an expert on this sort of the micro genres sort of within Doom. I think just sort of slow and heavy. We're working on a lot of new material too, which at the moment, which is still very much slow and heavy and very down-tuned, but I'm much more open to crossing styles a bit. I'm quite into the more soundtrack ambient side of things as well, so I'd like to see that expanded on, but I think the core of it will be very heavy, sad, slow music,
And I think with the new members as well, introducing what they're bringing something new to what we're doing as well. So that will inevitably change things, and it will evolve that way.
Was there sort of like a vision that was in mind with the making of this starting off? Like, did you know you wanted to go for the whole funeral doom sound and to have like that sort of darkness expressed with it, or was it just very much throwing paint at the wall and seeing what sticks? And now that you mentioned that you're bringing new members on board, did this almost completely change what the initial idea for Locusts and Honey was?
I think that we've discussed, Steve and I have discussed, how that we want to stick with the principles of it being slow, kind of sad music and very heavy. The idea with the EP was actually that I had this idea as I was influenced by this book on the bog bodies that were found. I was actually in Dublin, and I was in the National Museum of Archaeology there, and I saw these amazing preserved bodies that were pulled out of the bogs in, I think, the middle of Ireland, and then they're reading these poems by Seamus Heaney on the bog bodies. And so I wanted to write this piece of music, as you do, wanted to write this piece of music about them. And that's kind of where the idea, this loose concept, came across. Of course, I didn't actually write the lyrics, so I passed them over to Steve. So initially, this was very much a sort of project, a sort of conceptual project around this one theme. But I kind of enjoyed doing it, and I think Steve did too. And so we thought, well, let's make this a real band again now, and they sort of expand from there. So I gave the music with this very, with some of those ideas over to Steve for the lyrical sort of impetus.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of the lyrical aspect of it, Steve, what was the sort of a conceptual meaning behind this? Or would you consider Locusts and Honey for this upcoming EP or future music to be very conceptually driven, or does every song tend to have its own individual meaning in a way?
I think every song suggests something different, I guess, to me, like mood and what it might mean. But overall, Locusts and Honey does have the overarching concept of being just sort of heavy and gloomy. But there's lots to explore within that. With this record, it's I think it's like weirdly life affirming, but in a way that's looking very closely at death and what that can teach us and bring us. So there's only sort of two tracks, if you like, there with lyrics, and those are the ones that have been released so far. But it's looking at how best to sort of live our lives in the within the spectre of death there. Sort of that impetus that all things are coming to pass, and what does it mean to live a good life?
Yeah, I mean,
glories for sure. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, the quest of living the good life in a way, I just find that I don't want to say ironic, but it's interesting because like a lot of people, I feel like with a lot of like the whole funeral doom sound and with the depressing nature of it, some people from the outside looking in, people could be like, oh, it's a metal band. They're trying to be as depressing and dark and as gloomy as possible. But I think underneath this sort of doomy aspect for it, there is the constant underlying desire to achieve happiness in a way, right? Is that sort of like I don't want to say message, but sort of like the underlying meaning behind it?
Well, I think with heavy music generally, there's always been a sense of catharsis for me. I know it's helped me personally through some difficult times and with various mental health struggles. So it's sort of cathartic to write and to play and just to listen to when you see other shows. So yeah, I think there's always been that element there.
Is it all coming? Would you say that either musically or lyrically, is personal experiences a driving force behind the inspiration, or is this more or less kind of like an external means of expression where maybe it's almost like you're not bringing your everyday life into it, more of an escapism, I should say?
It's actually kind of a mishmash. I mean, I would say the driving force behind the lyrics is more about personal experience, but it is sort of seen through the lens of these outside concepts, like you say, looking at the bog bodies and what that means to us personally. So yeah, there's a lot of personal experience in there, but it might not be immediately apparent when you read the lyrics.
And would you say that maybe the lyrics could determine the music itself as well, or does music always have to come first before any lyricism comes into play?
Music always comes first. I mean, as much as I love poetry, and that's the language forward part of it, music with lyrics, I always think music comes first.
Yeah.
One of the reasons I wanted to sort of collaborate with Steve on this is that he's a great writer, and I wanted to make sure that the lyrics had, sometimes music and lyrics and sort of heavy music and sort of can be a bit lacking or something of an afterthought, and I knew they wouldn't be with Steve, but Steve sort of often told me that it's music first, essentially. Have that sort of audio language foremost, and the lyrics come second.
Now that you have a full band, is it a little less weight off of your shoulder, Thomas, because you were kind of like, it was Steve vocals, Thomas everything else?
Well, yeah. I mean, Steve can play too, and I'm really hoping that there'll be some musical contributions from Steve in the future. And actually, we actually have some, quite a few writers now in the band. But yes, basically, I'm still writing. I have plenty of ideas, etc. But like, I'm really happy to have other input. It's and for it not to feel like a mini dictatorship or something. I want the band to be a bit. I want the band to be a democracy.
When it comes to the inspiration for your writing, whether it would be for lyrics or music, is inspiration really something that you sought out and look for, or do you have kind of like a usual, or does inspiration just kind of strike out of nowhere and you just kind of let it hit you when it does?
Musically, it's arbitrary. I mean, it just comes, I think, for me. But if I'm writing, in the traditional sense of picking up a guitar and writing riffs, I can't say I always write to fit the mood. I will I always say that I find it hard to write, say, black metal in the summertime, for example. But sometimes things come from nowhere, really. I don't know what you think, Steve.
Well, with this one, it was your sort of driving obsession at the time that really inspired a lot of the thinking got the ball rolling on the lyrics for this one. But I think, well, generally, I think it can strike you at any point. If you're a curious individual, you'll find something that'll pique your interest.
Yeah,
we're writing several other people at the moment, and they're all pitching in different ideas. So it's exciting to have. We're in the process of writing a whole set of new stuff. So,
I want to ask this because you're writing new material now with the full band, and I'm sure it's going to be fucking kick ass. But you're also releasing, this new music now. So, is it fair to say, like, would you almost kind of want the people listening to you guys now to know, like, that these first two singles, while they're good, should be proud of them, these aren't representative of who you are at the moment. This is and like the new stuff that you are writing is really who Locusts and Honey is.
I don't know. I think it's all part of the same, I hate to use that word, journey, but there you go. I think it's very much, it's how we started. And I think that, well, hopefully we will play live in the future. And I can certainly see several of these bits of music, being featured. But I think there is that distinction from being something of a bedroom project to being a real working band and writing in that different way. I think that's fairly fundamental. And Steve and I have both done kind of both of those types of project, I would say, in the past. So I'd say it was a progression rather than wanting to sort of not disown, but it was a sort of a snapshot of something that I wrote last year and put together in just in quite quickly. And it's the starting point, really.
Yeah. Well, whenever I ask a band how the making of an album is, and they always say, "Oh, we all collaborated and it was such a mutual participation," I don't buy for a second of that. If you're in a band with 4 or 5 or so people and you're writing a dozen or so songs, there's going to be disagreement, and you all have your own different experiences and emotions that are channeled into the music. Do you think that's actually helpful, though? Do you think it really... I almost feel that if everybody really did feel the same, that would almost be a hindrance on the songwriting process.
To me, it's all a balance, and it's what makes being in bands sort of kind of great and awful at the same. I guess we've all been in bands. I certainly have been in bands where it's they've had potential to do stuff and fallen apart because people just can't get along, or people are too precious about materials. It's I really wanted this time around for us all to get along on a personal level and sort of be friends, and and I find that especially at my age makes it a lot easier, that process of being able to be honest about ideas and things. So yeah, the nature of collaboration is a difficult one because it's not an exact science. Sometimes sometimes people work very well together and sometimes people don't. Both processes can create great music. If that, even though it might sound a bit contradictory.
But and Stephen, for like the lyricism and the vocal aspects of it, because isolation is always such a great fuel for creativity. So do you prefer to write your parts when you're in the company of bandmates, or for lyrics it's better if you are just kind of like alone in your own element?
Well, first thing, I just sort of wait for the music to come in. So whatever these guys are putting out, if they put little demos and things together that they're doing, just so I can then work out the shapes. That comes first. That's the placing, and the mood, the suggestion of what it's going to be. But yeah, the lyrics, they're all done in isolation, and I turn up with them, and then hopefully everyone else likes them because it's tough.
Here's a question I want you both to elaborate on, and that's, how do you know when you're finished with a song?
I think it becomes apparent quite readily once you listen to it. You spend a long time tweaking it afterwards, and that's a problem. But in the basic songwriting and construction, certain riffs and things suggest certain lengths and repetitions, and anything longer does feel stretched. So you sort of know when to cut off. But yeah, I don't know, Tom, when you're sort of polishing.
It's a tricky one, but I feel that if something feels like it's going on forever and you just can't tie it up, perhaps that idea doesn't fit, with other ideas. I feel like it's quite a natural thing, I feel like it's just something that I think mostly with the kind of writing we've done here, things feel like they're coming to an end. I mean, it shouldn't be too difficult. It should be something you think about like too much, I think.
Fair enough. That was a very good and technical answer, and I have to give you all credit for answering that so professionally.
Probably dodging a real answer.
And then the final question I wanted to ask is touching upon this, and that's the topic of doom. You mentioned funeral doom. You mentioned the whole doom category, and even when I listen to you guys, it has nothing to do with you guys being represented by Ear Split, even though I think that they have a monopoly on like every doom band in existence. But when it comes to like the doom sound, because I'll put it this way: Catatonia is labeled as a doom band, but also Yob has been considered a doom band, and then Neurosis, and then Sleep. All of these bands sound very different from each other, and even like the first Anathema album is very doom and people nowadays are even referring to Black Sabbath as a doom band, which I know that they weren't calling themselves that when they started. Is there an underlying element that doom needs to have in order for it to be doom, aside from maybe like 17.5-minute long songs? But what makes something doom? Is there sort of a sound that kind of ties it all together?
I let Steve answer this one because he's your man, basically. I feel that the musically it's doomy for me, and all a lot of those bands I certainly enjoyed and have influenced, but I'm not an expert on the genre and all of its nuances. So I'll let Steve go with this.
Well, thanks, Tom. I think the tricky part comes is like you're trying to describe a sound with a sort of limited language, and doom is a very good adjective for a lot of the dark thoughts and feelings that we get. So in that way, it's being used more and more away from the narrow band of music it once represented. And it's making it more difficult to find out that particular band of music. Not saying one thing's better than the other, it's just it's starting to lose its currency, I think, as a term a bit, which is kind of why I prefer to think of us as just gloomy. But I don't know how you could define it. It's usually, in the way I think of it, it's usually slower, usually down-tuned, heavy, and very oppressive, I think, is probably the feeling that you get. But it's kind of an oppression that goes on so long that you end up feeling I do anyway, feeling uplifted by it by the end. Again, that catharsis. And that's kind of how I think of it. I mean, you mentioned bands like Yob, that's kind of, I don't really think of that as doom. It's kind of got more of a space. It's related, but it's definitely got that sort of spacey feel. And they've got some, it's great there. Sleep, again, I think of more sort of stoner, but there's only so many sub-genres of stoner as well. So
yeah,
I think
it's subgenre, but it's also like adjective. Like, put it this way: hardcore is a genre. It's a very important genre. But like how I've heard people call things, oh man, that is so hardcore, and they don't sound anything like Sick of It All. I've heard people say like, oh, that like you need to blacken those riffs a little bit, even though the band sounds nothing like Mayhem or Dark Throne. But like I do see some black metal riffs in the DNA of Locusts and Honey as well. So like I just feel like that every subgenre is just as much of a noun as it is an adjective, and vice versa.
Yeah, and everything is and everything's in flux, and the way we use words generally always change. So music is no different from that.
Yeah, definitely. So before we go, I want to thank you both so much for your time, and thank you for letting this music see the light of day, and I cannot wait to hear more. Just, is there anything else with Locusts and Honey you'd like to promote in terms of upcoming shows, and what else we could be expecting for the near future?
Well, there's no shows booked at the moment, but we are really hoping, I wouldn't want to put a date on it, that there will be live shows and more recordings sooner rather than later.
No, that's good.
That's what I can say for now. But we are working now towards creating more music and hopefully playing live.
Hell yeah. Well, thank you both so much. Everybody, we are here with Locusts and Honey. New stuff coming very soon. This is Alex from Heavy New York, and we will see you next time.